Chapter 1: The Morning After. I woke up with a pounding headache, the kind that feels like someone's playing a drum solo inside your skull. My mouth tasted like a mix of cheap tequila and regret, and for a split second I thought I was still dreaming. Then I felt it, the steady rise and fall of a chest beneath my cheek, an arm slung lazily over my waist, and the faint scent of cedarwood cologne that screamed Chris. My eyes snapped open, and there he was, my roommate, the poster boy for straight-edge perfection, fast asleep with his dark hair a mess and his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. David, the music major with a reputation as the campus's most flamboyant gay disaster, had somehow ended up plastered against him in his bed. Panic hit me like a freight train. I tried to piece together last night, the dorm party, the shots Sam kept shoving into my hands, the blurry memory of me belting out Sweet Caroline on a makeshift stage made of beer crates. Then, nothing. Just a blank space until this moment where I was apparently cuddling my straight-as-a-ruler roommate like he was my personal teddy bear. My heart raced as I squirmed, trying to extricate myself without waking him. But the second I shifted, his arm tightened around me, pulling me closer. I froze, my face inches from his, close enough to count the faint freckles across his nose. He mumbled something incoherent, his breath warm against my forehead, and I swear I almost passed out from the sheer mortification. "David?" His voice was groggy, rough with sleep, and it sent a shiver down my spine. His hazel eyes fluttered open, locking onto mine, and for a heartbeat we just stared at each other. Then reality seemed to slam into him. His arm jerked back like I'd electrocuted him, and he bolted upright, nearly knocking me off the bed. "What the hell are you doing in my bed?" he barked, his voice a mix of confusion and accusation. His bare chest heaved. He must have stripped down to his boxers at some point, and I couldn't help but notice the way his muscles flexed under the morning light streaming through her dorm window. Not that I was staring. Okay, I was totally staring. I don't know. I stammered, scrambling to sit up and clutching the blanket like a lifeline. My shirt was rumpled, one sleeve hiked up to my elbow, and my jeans felt like they'd fused to my skin overnight. I was drunk. You were there. I must have miscalculated. Miscalculated? Chris's eyebrows shot up, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You miscalculated your way into my bed? What, did you think I was a giant pillow? Maybe. I shot back, my face burning. You're soft enough for it. A lie. He was all hard planes and sharp edges, but my brain was short-circuiting, and sass was my only defense. He groaned, dragging a hand through his hair, which only made it stick up more adorably. This is why I don't do parties. You're a menace. Me? You're the one who didn't kick me out. I pointed out, crossing my arms. What kind of straight guy lets a gay dude cuddle him all night? The words hung in the air, heavy and reckless. Chris's jaw tightened, and for a second I thought he might actually explode. He'd never been openly homophobic. Hell, he'd been cool about me coming out freshman year, but he was the kind of guy who radiated "I'm not into that" energy. I braced myself for the inevitable freakout, my stomach twisting with dread. I'd been nursing a hopeless crush on him since we'd moved in together, and now I'd probably ruined everything. But instead of yelling, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. I was drunk too, he muttered finally, looking away. Didn't even notice until now? Ouch. That stung more than it should have. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. Wow, thanks. Good to know I'm that forgettable. That's not. He stopped, pinching the bridge of his nose like I was giving him a migraine. Just get out of my bed, David. I obeyed, practically leaping to the floor, but not before my foot caught on the edge of his blanket. I stumbled, flailing like a cartoon character, and landed on my ass with a thud. Chris snorted, and when I glared up at him, I caught the faintest twitch of a smile on his lips. Bastard. Before I could retaliate, the door burst open, and Sam and Eric, our nosy neighbors from across the hall, strolled in like they owned the place. Sam, with his perpetually tousled blonde hair, carried a tray of coffee cups, while Eric, all lean muscle and smirking confidence, leaned against the doorframe. "Morning, lovebirds," Sam sang, waggling his eyebrows. "How do you sleep?" Separately, Chris snapped, yanking a shirt over his head so fast I barely had time to mourn the loss of the view. "Oh, sure," Eric drawled, his dark eyes glinting with mischief. "That's why David's got bedhead and you've got that I just got laid glow." "I do not." Chris and I protested in unison, which only made Sam cackle louder. "Relax, we're just messing with you," Sam said, handing me a coffee. "But seriously, what happened?" Last I saw, David was serenading the room and Chris was brooding in the corner like a finance major cliché. I don't brood, Chris grumbled, snatching a coffee from the tray. You totally brood, I said, smirking to spite myself. You're like a sexy vampire minus the fangs. He choked on his sip, coughing violently, and I felt a tiny surge of victory. Sam and Eric exchanged a look. Those two were a couple themselves, and they lived for stirring the pot. Eric perched on my desk chair, spinning it lazily. So, Spill, did you two finally hook up, or was it just a cuddle session? Nothing happened. I yelped, maybe a little too loud. My mind raced back to the feel of Chris's arm around me, the way his heartbeat had synced with mine in the quiet of the night. Nothing had happened, right? I'd have remembered if it did. Probably. Chris shot me a sidelong glance, his face a mask of irritation, or was that embarrassment? He climbed into my bed like a drunk koala. That's it. A koala? I gasped, mock offended. I'm at least a drunk panther. Way sexier. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Chris deadpanned, but his ears were pink and that was enough to keep my hope alive. Sam clapped his hands, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. This is gold. You two are a rom-com waiting to happen. More like a horror movie, Chris muttered, but he didn't meet my eyes. He grabbed his laptop and headed for the door. I've got class. Try not to burn the dorm down while I'm gone. As the door slammed behind him, I sank onto my own bed, still warm from the chaos of the morning. My head throbbed, but it wasn't just the hangover. It was the memory of waking up in his arms the way he hadn't pushed me away until he'd had to. I'd been in love with Chris for years, his quiet intensity, his rare smiles, the way he'd hum along to my guitar strumming when he thought I wasn't listening. And now I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Dude, you're blushing, Eric said, snapping me out of my spiral. Shut up, I groaned, burying my face in my hands. This is a disaster. Or an opportunity, Sam countered, winking. He didn't kick you out last night, did he? Maybe Mr. Straight and Narrow isn't as straight as he thinks. I wanted to believe that I did, but Chris was a fortress and I was just a guy with a guitar and a tendency to cry at sappy movies. Still, as I sipped my coffee and listened to Sam and Eric bicker about whether I should serenade Chris again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The air between us felt charged, fragile, like a melody waiting to be played. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one hearing it. Chapter 2: The Cold War. The next few days were torture. Chris and I tiptoed around each other like we were roommates in a silent film. All awkward glances and muttered excuses. I catch him staring at me over his coffee mug, only for him to jerk his head away like I'd caught him stealing. He'd catch me humming nervously while tuning my guitar, and I'd fumble the strings so badly it sounded like a dying cat. The dorm felt smaller, the air thicker, and every creak of the floorboard seemed to scream, "You slept in his bed. Idiot." My crush on him had always been a quiet ache, something I could tuck away behind my music and my bravado. But now, it was a live wire, sparking every time he brushed past me to grab his textbooks. I tried to act normal, whatever that meant after waking up tangled in your straight roommate's arms. Monday morning, I blasted my playlist through my earbuds and sprawled across my bed, pretending to study music theory. Chris sat at his desk, hunched over his laptop, his fingers flying across the keys as he crunched numbers for some finance project. He was in full high-achiever mode. Crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hair falling into his eyes. I peeked at him over my notebook, tracing the line of his forearm, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he looked up, and I nearly dropped my pencil. "What?" he said, his voice clipped. "Nothing?" I lied, scribbling nonsense on my page to cover the fact that I'd been sketching his jawline instead of chord progressions. "Just admiring your dedication. Very sexy." He rolled his eyes, but his cheeks flushed the tiniest bit. "Stop being weird." "I'm not weird. I'm charming." I shot back, grinning. "You're just jealous of my natural charisma." "Yeah, that's it," he deadpanned, turning back to his screen. But the silence that followed was colder than before, and I felt it settle into my bones. He'd been like this since the morning after, distant, guarded. like he was building a wall between us brick by brick. I told myself it was fine. He was straight. He was freaked out. I'd overstepped, and now he was recalibrating. But the part of me that cried at Pixar movies and secretly wrote love songs about him wouldn't let it go. By Wednesday, the Cold War was in full swing. He started leaving the dorm earlier, coming back later, barely speaking unless Sam and Eric were around to force it. I'd catch glimpses of him in the cafeteria, laughing with his finance bros, and it stung more than I'd admit. I threw myself into music instead, dragging my guitar to the practice rooms and pouring my mess of feelings into a melody that sounded like heartbreak with a side of tequila. My fingers trembled on the strings, my throat tight with unshed tears. I was a sensitive mess. Tears were my superpower, whether I liked it or not, and the thought that I'd ruined our friendship tipped me over the edge. A few hot tears splashed onto the fretboard, and I cursed under my breath, wiping them away with my sleeve. That's when Sam found me, barging into the room with his usual lack of boundaries. "Dude, you look like a kicked puppy. What's up?" "Nothing," I mumbled, strumming a discordant chord. "Just practicing." "Bullshit," he said, plopping onto the bench beside me. "This is about Chris, isn't it? You've been moping since the cuddle fiasco." "I'm not moping," I protested, but my voice cracked, and Sam raised an eyebrow. "Okay, fine. He's avoiding me, and I don't know why. I mean, I get it, he's straight, I'm gay, it's weird now. But he didn't have to turn into the Ice King." Sam snorted. "Chris? Straight? Sure, and I'm the next American Idol. He's been staring at you like a lost puppy since freshman year. You're just too busy being dramatic to notice." I blinked at him, my heart doing a little flip. "What?" "Trust me, he's not mad. He's freaking out because he liked it," Sam said, smirking. "Eric and I have a bet going on how long it takes him to crack." I wanted to believe him, God, I did, but doubt gnawed at me. He's not into guys. He's made that pretty clear. "Has he?" Sam countered. "Or has he just been too chicken shit to admit he's into you?" Before I could argue, the door swung open again and Eric poked his head in. "Yo, crisis alert. Chris's childhood sweetheart just showed up and she's clinging to him like a koala. Your koala status is in jeopardy, David." My stomach dropped. "What childhood sweetheart?" "Emma," Eric said, grinning like this was the best drama he'd seen all week. "Blonde, gorgeous, looks like she walked out of a rom-com. They're in the quad right now." I didn't think. I just grabbed my guitar and bolted, Sam and Eric trailing behind me like gleeful accomplices. Sure enough, there they were, Chris leaning against a tree, arms crossed, while a girl, Emma, presumably chatted animatedly, her hand resting on his arm. She was stunning, all golden hair and perfect teeth, and the way she looked at him made my chest tighten. Chris didn't seem thrilled, but he wasn't pushing her away either. Jealousy flared up, hot and irrational, and I clenched my fists around my guitar strap. "Trouble in paradise?" Sam whispered, nudging me. "Shut up," I hissed, but my voice was shaky. I turned to leave, but Eric grabbed my arm. "Nope, you're not running." "Let's stir the pot," he said, dragging me closer. Before I could protest, he called out, "Hey, Chris. Your roommate's here to serenade you." Chris's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine. Emma turned too, her smile faltering as she sized me up. I wanted to sink into the ground, but Sam shoved me forward and I stumbled into the spotlight I didn't ask for. Hi," I said, waving awkwardly. "Just passing through." "David," Chris said, his voice flat but his gaze intense. "What are you doing?" "Saving you from boredom," I blurted, my mouth running ahead of my brain. "Unless you're enjoying the company." "She's cute." "Very." "Step forward, wives." Emma's eyebrows shot up and Chris's lips twitched, but he didn't laugh. "Emma's an old friend," he said, stepping away from her touch. "She's visiting." Cool, cool," I said, nodding like a bobblehead. "Well, I've got music stuff. See ya." I turned to flee, but Emma's voice stopped me. "You're the gay roommate, right?" she asked, her tone curious but edged with something I couldn't place. "Chris talks about you all the time." I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Does he?" "Not like that," Chris cut in too fast, his face reddening. "She's exaggerating." Emma smiled a little too sweetly. "Sure, whatever you say." The air crackled with tension and I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or if Chris was actually squirming. Sam and Eric were no help, snickering behind me like this was a live comedy show. I forced a grin, my jealousy simmering beneath the surface. Well, I'll leave you two to catch up. Don't let me interrupt the wedding planning. I bolted before Chris could respond, my guitar bouncing against my back as I speed-walked across campus. My mind was a mess, Chris, the way he looked at me like he wanted to say something but didn't. I didn't know what was worse, the idea that he hated me now or the flicker of hope that Sam might be right. Either way, I was screwed and the Cold War between us was only getting frostier. Chapter 3, The Bar Confession. By Friday, I'd convinced myself I was over it. Chris could avoid me all he wanted, fine. He could have his perfect blonde childhood sweetheart, great. I'd survive. I'd drown my feelings in music and cheap beer and maybe flirt with some random guy at the next party to prove I didn't care. That was the plan anyway until Sam and Eric dragged me to the Rusty Anchor, the dive bar just off campus where the drinks were strong and the vibes were messy. They'd rounded up the whole dorm crew, including Chris, who'd been roped in under the guise of team bonding. I wasn't sure if I wanted to thank them or strangle them. The bar was a haze of dim lights and sticky floors, the air thick with the smell of fried food and spilled whiskey. I perched on a stool at the corner of our booth, nursing a beer and trying not to stare at Chris across the table. He looked unfairly good, dark jeans, a black Henley that hugged his shoulders, his hair still damp from a shower. He was laughing at something Eric said, his rare smile lighting up his face, and my stomach did that stupid flip it always did when he let his guard down. I hated how much I loved it. Dude, you're pining, Sam whispered, sliding into the seat next to me with a grin. It's adorable. I'm not pining, I hissed, taking a swig of my beer. I'm brooding. It's sexier. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night, he teased, echoing Chris's line from last week. I glared at him, but he just laughed and shoved a shot of tequila my way. Loosen up. Maybe tonight's the night you finally tell him. Tell him what? I snorted, downing the shot. The burn hit my throat and I winced. That I've been in love with him since he helped me move my amp into the dorm? That I'm a pathetic mess who cries when he ignores me? Pass. Sam's eyes softened, but before he could say anything, Eric yelled from the other end of the table, shots for everyone. Chris, you're buying. Chris groaned but stood, heading to the bar with his wallet in hand. I watched him go, the way his jeans clung to his legs, the casual confidence in his stride. Then I caught Emma's name in the conversation. Apparently, she'd texted him earlier, and my mood soured faster than the tequila hit my bloodstream. I grabbed another shot from the tray when Chris returned, downing it without a word. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment, just slid back into his seat and sipped his own drink. An hour later, I was 3 beers and 2 shots deep, and the room was starting to spin. The jukebox blared some old rock song, and Sam had dragged Eric onto the tiny dance floor where they were grinding on each other like nobody was watching. I laughed, leaning back in my seat, the alcohol loosening the knot in my chest. Chris was still there, nursing a whiskey, his eyes flicking to me every few seconds like he was keeping tabs. I caught his gaze and grinned, sloppy and reckless. What's your deal, huh? I slurred, leaning across the table. You've been weird all week. You mad at me or what? He blinked, caught off guard. I'm not mad. Liar, I said, pointing a wobbly finger at him. You've been avoiding me since I climbed into your bed like a sexy koala. You liked it, didn't you? His jaw dropped, and for a second I thought he might bolt. But then he laughed, a short, startled burst that made my heart skip. You're drunk, David. Yeah, and you're hot, I shot back, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. It's annoying. You're all broody and perfect, and I've been dying over you for years, and you don't even notice. The table went quiet, or maybe it was just the blood rushing in my ears. Chris stared at me, his glass frozen halfway to his mouth, his hazel eyes wide. I realized what I'd said, and panic clawed at my chest, but the alcohol kept my mouth running. I mean, not dying, obviously, but shit, you know what I mean. I like you, okay? Like you. And it sucks because you're straight and I'm a mess and ugh, forget it. I slumped back, covering my face with my hands, willing the floor to swallow me. The silence stretched, unbearable, until I felt the table shift. I peeked through my fingers and saw Chris standing, his expression unreadable. He grabbed my arm, pulling me up with surprising gentleness. Come on, he muttered. You're done. Done? I echoed, stumbling as he steered me toward the door. What, you're kicking me out now? Perfect. I'm taking you home, he said, his voice low but firm. His hand stayed on my arm, steadying me as we stepped into the cool night air. The campus loomed ahead, streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I tripped over my own feet, and he caught me, his arm sliding around my waist. My breath hitched at the contact, his warmth seeping through my jacket. You don't have to babysit me, I mumbled, but I leaned into him anyway, my head spinning from more than just the booze. His cologne filled my senses, and I couldn't stop myself from burying my face in his shoulder just for a second. He tensed but didn't pull away. You're a lightweight, he said, his tone softer than I expected. And a loudmouth. Yeah, well, you're stuck with me, I replied, my words muffled against his shirt. We reached the dorm, and he half-carried me up the stairs, his grip strong but careful. When we got to our room, he dumped me on my bed, and I sprawled out, staring at the ceiling as it tilted. Chris, I said, my voice small. He paused by his desk, looking back at me. Did I ruin everything? He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his silhouette sharp against the glow of his desk lamp, his hands shoved in his pockets. Get some sleep, he said, finally, turning away. But as he flicked off the light, I swore I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that wasn't anger or disgust. Something that made my heart ache even more. I woke up the next morning with a hangover from hell and zero memory of what I'd said. My head throbbed, my mouth was dry, and my bed smelled faintly of Chris's cologne, like he'd been close at some point. I groaned, rolling over, and found a glass of water and 2 aspirin on my nightstand. A sticky note was stuck to the glass, scrawled in Chris's neat handwriting. Drink this. You're an idiot. I stared at it, my pulse racing. He'd taken care of me. He hadn't freaked out, at least, not enough to ditch me. I downed the water, my mind a jumbled mess of hope and dread. I couldn't remember my confession, but something had shifted again. Chris was quieter that morning, but he didn't avoid me. He made coffee, handed me a mug without a word, and sat across from me, his knee brushing mine under the table. It was accidental, or maybe it wasn't. Either way, it sent a jolt through me, and when I met his eyes, he didn't look away. Rough night, he asked, his tone dry but not cold. You have no idea, I croaked, clutching my mug like a lifeline. He smirked, just a little, and I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing, or if maybe, just maybe, he'd heard every word. Chapter 4, The Family Storm. The next week was a roller coaster I didn't sign up for. Chris wasn't avoiding me anymore, progress, I guess, but he wasn't exactly chatty either. He'd linger in the dorm longer, steal glances when he thought I wasn't looking, and once, when I tripped over my guitar case, he caught me by the elbow with a grip that lasted a beat too long. It was maddening, this push and pull, like he was orbiting me but too scared to land. I'd spilled my guts at the bar, or so Sam gleefully informed me later, and Chris hadn't run screaming. That had to mean something, right? My fragile, tear-prone heart clung to it like a lifeboat. But then Thursday hit and everything went to hell. I was sprawled on my bed, strumming a half-finished song about unrequited love subtle I know when the door slammed open. Chris stormed in, his face a thundercloud, his tie loosened like he'd been tugging at it in frustration. He didn't even glance at me, just threw his laptop bag onto his desk with a thud that made me flinch. Bad day at the finance factory? I quipped, sitting up. My attempt at humor fell flat. He didn't even crack a smirk. My dad's in town, he muttered, pacing the small space like a caged animal. He's pissed. I frowned, setting my guitar aside. About what? Chris stopped, running a hand through his hair, his jaw tight. He found out about us. My heart stopped. Us? What us? Did I miss something between the drunk cuddling and the silent treatment? He shot me a look, half exasperation, half something I couldn't name. Someone saw us at the bar. Took a picture of me dragging your drunk ass home. Sent it to Emma, who told my dad. Now he thinks he cut off, his face reddening. Thinks you're what? I pressed, my pulse racing. Guy? In love with me? Both. David, he warned, but there was no heat in it. He sank onto his bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He's losing it. Says I'm throwing away my future, embarrassing the family. He's threatening to cut me off unless I fix this. I stared at him, my stomach twisting. Vincent, Chris's dad, was a control freak with a bank account bigger than most small countries. I'd heard the stories, the private schools, the expectations, the way he'd mapped out Chris's life like a corporate merger. Fix this sounded ominous. What does that even mean? Emma, Chris said, his voice flat. He wants me to get engaged. Prove I'm not whatever he thinks I am. The room spun, and not from a hangover this time. Engaged? To Emma? Are you serious? He didn't answer, just stared at the floor, and that silence was worse than anything he could have said. Anger flared up, hot and irrational, and I leapt to my feet. So, what, you're just gonna marry her because Daddy says so? That's bullshit, Chris. It's not that simple, he snapped, standing too. We were inches apart now, the air crackling between us. You don't get it. He controls everything, my tuition, my trust fund, my future. I don't just get to say no. Yes, you do. I shouted, my voice breaking. You're not a puppet. You don't have to live his life. He laughed, bitter and sharp. Easy for you to say. You're free, David. You've got your music, your dreams. I've got a leash around my neck. I flinched, his words cutting deeper than I'd expected. You think I'm free? I've been stuck pining after you for years, scared to ruin what we had. And now you're gonna run off with Emma because you're too chicken shit to fight. His eyes widened, and for a second I thought he might hit me or hug me. Instead, he stepped closer, his breath ragged. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me, I said, softer now, my anger melting into desperation. Tell me what's really going on in that head of yours. He didn't. He just stared at me, his chest heaving, his hands clenched at his sides. Then the dorm window rattled, rain, sudden and fierce, drumming against the glass. It broke the spell, and he turned away, grabbing his jacket. I need air, he muttered, and before I could stop him, he was gone. I stood there, alone, the storm outside mirroring the one in my chest. My eyes stung, and I let the tears fall this time, hot and messy. I'd pushed too hard, and now he was slipping away. Hours later, I was still awake, curled on my bed with my guitar untouched, when the door creaked open. Chris stumbled in, soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead, his shirt clinging to every line of his body. He looked wrecked, wild, almost, and my breath caught as he crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped in front of me. I told him no, he said, his voice raw. I told him I'm done. I blinked, sitting up. What? I'm not marrying Emma. I'm not doing any of it. He stepped closer, water dripping onto the floor, his eyes locked on mine. I'm done pretending. My heart thudded, loud enough I swore he could hear it. Pretending what? He didn't answer with words. Instead, he grabbed my face, his wet hands cold against my skin, and kissed me. It was hard, desperate, tasting of rain and whiskey and years of holding back. I froze for a split second, then melted into him, my hands fisting in his soaked shirt as I kissed him back. His lips were firm, insistent, sliding against mine with a hunger that made my knees weak. He pressed me against the wall, his body flush with mine, and I gasped into his mouth as his fingers tangled in my hair. When we broke apart, panting, his forehead rested against mine, water trickling down his face onto mine. I heard you, he whispered. At the bar. Every word. I swallowed, my throat tight. And I've been an idiot, he said, his voice trembling. I've wanted you for so long, David. I just didn't know how to say it. Tears welled up again, damn my leaky eyes, but this time they were happy ones. I laughed, shaky and relieved, and pulled him back in, kissing him softer this time, savoring the taste of him. The storm raged outside, but in here, it was warm, electric, ours. We didn't hear the door until Sam's voice cut through the haze. Well, hot damn. Eric, you owe me $20. Chris groaned, burying his face in my shoulder, but I just laughed, loud and free. Sam and Eric barged in, soaked from the rain, grinning like idiots. Party at our place. Sam declared. You 2 lovebirds are the guests of honor. Give us a minute, I said, still tangled in Chris, my heart fuller than it had ever been. They left, whooping, and Chris lifted his head, his smile shy but real. Guess we're official now, he said. Guess so, I replied, kissing him again, slow and sweet. The storm had broken us open, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of what came next. Chapter 5, The World Ahead. The weeks after the storm felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Chris and I were a tangle of hands and laughter, stealing kisses in the dorm when we thought no one was looking. Though Sam and Eric caught us more times than I'd admit. The Cold War was over, replaced by something warm and messy and real. He'd sit on my bed while I strummed my guitar, his fingers brushing my knee as he pretended to study. I'd catch him humming along, and my heart would do that ridiculous flip every time. We weren't perfect. There were still awkward moments, like when I cried during a rom-com and he teased me mercilessly. But we were us, and that was enough. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. Vincent didn't take Chris's rebellion lightly. The calls started the day after the kiss. Harsh, clipped voicemails demanding Chris come to his senses. Chris ignored them at first, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened every time his phone buzzed. He'd cut ties with the family fortune, which meant no more cushy trust fund, no more safety net. He was free, but freedom came with a price, and I hated that I couldn't shield him from it. One night, we were sprawled on his bed, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my back. The dorm was quiet, just the hum of the heater and the faint strum of my guitar from earlier still echoing in my head. "You okay?" I asked, tilting my chin to look at him. His hazel eyes were distant, staring at the ceiling. "Yeah," he said, but it was a lie. I poked his ribs, and he squirmed, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "Okay, not really. Dad's selling my car. Says I don't deserve it if I'm throwing my life away." I sat up, indignation flaring. "Throwing your life away? Because you're with me?" He grabbed my hand, pulling me back down. "Not just that, because I'm not following his script. He wanted me in finance, married to Emma, running his empire. I'm choosing music and you instead." My chest tightened, a mix of guilt and awe. "You don't have to choose me over everything, you know? I'd still love you if you kept the car." He laughed, soft and genuine, and kissed my forehead. "I'd rather have you than a BMW. Besides, I've got a plan." "Oh." I arched an eyebrow, snuggling closer. "Do tell, Mr. X-Rich Kid." "Graduation's in 2 months," he said, his voice steadying. "We travel, see the world. Then I'll figure out what's next. Maybe Boston. Support your music dreams while I find mine." I blinked, my leaky eyes threatening to betray me again. "You'd move to Boston for me? For us?" he corrected, brushing a thumb across my cheek. "I'm done living for him. I want you." I kissed him then, slow and deep, tasting the promise in his words. The future was uncertain, but with him it felt possible. Graduation came fast. The campus buzzed with caps and gowns, families snapping photos, the air thick with possibility. Chris and I stood together in our robes, my guitar slung over my shoulder because I refused to part with it even for a day. Sam and Eric flanked us, already tipsy from smuggled champagne, their arms around each other like the obnoxiously cute couple they'd become. Eric had finally asked Sam out after the storm night, and now they were insufferable in the best way. "Speech time," Sam crowed, shoving me toward the makeshift stage. I'd been roped into performing at the dorm's farewell party, and I'd written something new, a song about storms and second chances, with a melody that felt like Chris. He stood in the crowd, hands in his pockets, his smile small but proud as I strummed the first chords. My voice shook at first, but his gaze steadied me, and by the end, the crowd was cheering, Sam whistling loud enough to wake the dead. Backstage, aka behind a folding table, Chris pulled me into a hug, his lips brushing my ear. "You're a sap," he murmured. "You love it?" I shot back, grinning as he kissed me quick and fierce. The real test came later at the official ceremony. Vincent showed up, stiff in a tailored suit, his face a mask of disapproval. Chris tensed beside me, his hand finding mine under the bleachers. "You don't have to talk to him," I whispered. "I do," he said, squeezing my fingers. "For me." He walked over and I watched, my stomach in knots. Their voices were low, sharp, Vincent gesturing, Chris standing tall. Then Chris turned, walked back to me, and didn't look back. "He's done," he said simply. "Told me I'm on my own." I said good. I hugged him tight, my face buried in his robe. "You're not alone. You've got me. And us." Sam chimed in, popping up with Eric. "Dorm squad forever." Vincent left without a word, and Emma, surprise guest, approached instead. She smiled, softer than before. I'm happy for you, she said to Chris, then glanced at me. Take care of him. Always, I promised, and she nodded, walking away with a wave. That night, we packed. The dorm was a mess of boxes and memories, my guitar case covered in travel stickers, Chris's finance books stacked for donation. We'd booked flights, first stop, London, then wherever the wind took us. Sam and Eric crashed our packing party, bringing pizza and beer, and we ended up sprawled on the floor, laughing about the past year. You two were so clueless, Eric said, tossing a crust at Chris. We knew you'd end up together. Shut up, Chris grumbled, but he pulled me closer, his arm around my shoulders. Admit it, Sam teased. You're obsessed with him. Maybe, Chris said, his voice low, and I elbowed him, blushing. The next morning, we stood at the airport, bags checked, boarding passes in hand. Chris looked nervous, new territory for both of us, but when he laced his fingers with mine, it felt right. Ready? He asked. Ready, I said, squeezing his hand. We stepped through security, the world stretching out ahead, and I couldn't stop smiling. Boston would come later, my music, his dreams, but for now it was just us, two idiots in love chasing the horizon. As the plane took off, I leaned my head on his shoulder, his warmth grounding me. You're stuck with me now, I murmured. Good, he replied, kissing my temple. Wouldn't have it any other way. The sky was endless outside the window, and so were we.